Have any of you ever heard of the word intercalate? Anyone? Well, I thought you probably pronounced it intercalation. Well, at any rate, it turns out that it's a transitive verb, and as I was studying our gospel for today, I looked online and someone had a commentary, of course, about our gospel, and they said this is an example of intercalation. Okay, what's that? Well, that's merely when you insert something in something else. So we start out with the story of Jairus and his 12-year-old daughter, and then right in the middle of that comes the story about the woman with the hemorrhages. So that's what it is. And, at first it might seem like, well, okay, why is this? And then it goes back to the original story and finishes that. And, well, okay, they don't have anything to do with each other. But they do, if you think about it. First of all, it's about two females. And being females, they're not named. Who's the one that's named? Jairus, because he's a male and he's the leader. And also the other interesting thing is, I don't know if you picked up the years, 12. The woman was bleeding for 12 years, and the little girl was how old? 12. So the woman was bleeding as long as the little child was alive. So it's really interesting. The other interesting thing was, I've always wondered, well, for heaven's sakes, what could this poor woman have been bleeding for 12 years that she was still alive? And this person suggested it was hemorrhoids. I mean, what can I say? It could have been fibroids too, but it could have been hemorrhoids. And I thought, well, if that were the problem, I don't think I'd go out and announce about it. But, whatever. So I found it was very interesting. And this was one instance where I really wish we could have had a little Bible study before the sermon. But it is a very interesting lesson today. So I have a confession to make. After my first year of seminary was over, my home pastor invited me to preach one Sunday. Any Sunday. I could pick whenever I wanted to preach that summer. So I read through the lectionaries, scoured them, and looked at all the appointed lessons for the whole summer. And I remember choosing this lesson, the same one we have today, that I was going to use for the basis for my first sermon ever. I thought it would be easy, a slam dunk. Right. It was really an awful sermon. I have to admit that. It really was pretty bad. And after 31 years, I hope I've gotten a little better, but you'll have to be the judge. So, please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. In the early years of my ministry, I had opportunities to study this passage and preach on it several times, and I pray I did a better job than after that first summer break out of seminary in attempting to convey not only what these actions and events meant to the people in Jesus' day, but also, of course, what they might mean to us today. Both of these encounters are related for us here in Mark, but also in Matthew and Luke. And the events are called the same in each. A girl restored to life and a woman healed. Now, when 3 of the 4 gospel writers recount the same happenings, the message is pretty clear. This is important. We need to pay attention. For here Jesus has given not just one miraculous healing, but 2. The message is really crystal clear. When all hope seems lost, difficult as it may be, we must keep the faith and believe that God and Jesus Christ can do, have done, and will do the most amazing things. In my early days as a pastor and preaching, these were two dramatic stories to think about and study and share. But I really had no idea just how powerful they would become to me over time. Ever since I was a little kid, I always knew I wanted to be a dad when I grew up. And so when I was 28, God granted that prayer. A baby girl, Laura, was born to me and my former wife. Laura was a sweet infant and a fun little child as she grew. She was Daddy's little girl, always my shadow, and I don't know how it ever started, but I eventually started calling her Toots. Hey Toots, come on, let's go. We're going to do this and go here and go there. And as Laura grew, she was a solid child. She wasn't really fat, but she wasn't thin either. And to this very day, we have no explanation why, but when she was in second grade, she experienced a choking incident one day when she was at the mall with her mother. She bit off a piece of hot dog, and we think maybe she inhaled as she bit down, and it turned out to be half the hot dog, and it lodged in her throat. Laura's mom is a nurse, and she tried to dislodge it with the Heimlich maneuver, but she had no success, and then there was commotion, and another mom came running, and turned out she was a nurse as well. And it took her a while, but after a while she was able to dislodge the piece of hot dog and get it out. It was a frightening time, to be sure, but Laura was okay, and it was over, we thought. And little did we know that much more terrifying times lay ahead of us. For as a result of this choking incident, and at the same time, I had my suspicions for a while that a classmate may have been bullying her about her weight, Laura became anorexic. We noticed that pretty quickly Laura had definitely lost some weight, but she was still eating, we thought. One Sunday morning, her mom was at work, and I was helping Laura to get dressed for church, and the clothes that her mom laid out for her just fell right off of her. And of course, I was running late, the kids were running late, and I had to scramble to find other clothes, and it just hit like a bolt of lightning. I knew that something was terribly wrong, and I was absolutely sure that she was anorexic. Because when I was a teenager, I was anorexic. So we took her to the pediatricians the next day, and we shared what we thought was the problem. And I believe she had lost about 10 pounds. Maybe it was even more, I don't exactly recall. And I think she went from 90 to 80 pounds initially. Well, we were so blessed to have two amazing pediatricians. They were just awesome to Laura and to us. And even the doctors agreed, this is probably anorexia because it came on fast and she had lost so much weight so fast. And since that was the problem we were facing, she would have to come every 2 weeks to have weight checks. Well, after the choking incident, Laura would only eat 4 things: Trix cereal, applesauce, Campbell's tomato soup, and I don't know why, Cheez-Its. I tried to encourage her. I made other things for her to eat. And there were times when I thought she actually ate these things. But then in time, I came to find food wrapped in napkins and tissues and stuffed in her old shoes and hidden around the house in various places. And I really was devastated because I thought she had eaten these things. I thought we were making progress, but I guess when you're in desperate times, you just hope and hope. And in hindsight, I suppose I should have known that we really weren't moving forward, because every 2 weeks we went to the doctor, she lost more weight. Eventually, she weighed in at 58 pounds. And all of this happened in just 2.5 months. When we got to that point, to say that I was scared really doesn't even begin to describe how I felt. By that point, I was almost unable to drag myself out of bed and start each new day. All I wanted to do was just pull the covers over my head, because there wasn't anything I could do to help my daughter. The only things I could do were to keep the faith and pray, and get up and take care of our other 2 younger children. And that's what kept me going during those horrible days. Well, finally, on one of her weight checks, one of the doctors bounded into the room, and he was so ecstatic, and he told us that connected with the world-renowned Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, there's a facility called the Seashore House. And the Seashore House is a 30-day in-house facility that helps children who are anorexic and bulimic to overcome or deal with their illnesses. And he was so excited for this prospect to help Laura, and so were we. But the excitement didn't last long, because guess what? My insurance plan would not cover the cost, which was sadly quite exorbitant. It was as much for a child to go to the Seashore House as it was for any teenager or adult to go to a first-class drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. At that time, it was about $30,000. And you had to pay for it. Insurance didn't cover it. Instead, our insurance that I had dictated that she go to Friends Hospital in Philadelphia, which is a Quaker hospital, very well known. And they also have a world-class facility that treats people with anorexia and bulimia. So off to North Philly we went one day with renewed hope in our hearts. Well, this time my insurance would cover the cost. But Friends Hospital did not treat any person under 12 years of age. Laura was 7. But doctor, I pleaded, there are children younger than 12, like Laura, who desperately need your help. She's literally dying right before our eyes. He was a kindly older man, and he sympathized, of course, with our plight, but his hands were tied. He did tell us that doctors and other people on the board of the hospital were working to change that policy. They'd become keenly aware that anorexia and bulimia did not hit certain ages. It wasn't just something that hit teenagers. It wasn't something that just hit teenage girls, because they knew that it affected boys and girls and men and women. They were equal opportunity illnesses. They knew the policy had to change if they were going to help people. And so we returned home even more dejected. But then, the next day, one of the pediatricians called to say that there was another option for Laura, for her to see a counseling group who were specifically trained in anorexia and bulimia, particularly as they affected children. After everything that had gone wrong, hope was really not in abundance in my heart. But I clung to the admonition to not lose heart. But it's hard to, isn't it, at times? It's difficult to not lose heart when someone you love so much is literally dying right before your eyes and you are utterly powerless to help them. All I can say is that prayers for Laura continued unabated. We never stopped praying. This person told that person, this church told that church, and the prayers went on and on and on. And for a young pastor who always encouraged others to keep the faith and keep on praying in their own difficult times, it was a momentous and powerful experience to feel prayers at work for both Laura and us in our time of need. I was never so humbled and so thankful in my life. We'll never know. Laura was never really able to say, but somehow they reached her. And with just a few weeks to go before Christmas, she very slowly started to eat again. And by Christmas, she was getting back to enjoying more than those 4 foods that she ate, and was eating things she loved. There still are no adequate words to express the joy I felt at seeing my beautiful daughter come back to life. To this day, 24 years later, I still attribute Laura's resurrection, if you will, to faith that God and Jesus Christ could heal Laura, to the power of untold numbers of prayer that were said for her, and to all the awesome people who cared about her and who worked so hard to save her life. When I think back to the summer of 1991, when I first gave that truly awful sermon, there's no way that I could have known that one day I would be the dad in today's story and that my daughter would be on the brink of death. Back then, and until this story became more than a story, I merely attempted to lift up this central teaching that when we least expect it, in ways that we might not expect it, we can be and are healed by the amazing power of God and Jesus Christ. In the very darkest moments of each one of our lives, when we too are brought to our knees in sheer desperation, just like the dad and the woman in today's gospel, God and Jesus Christ see our faith. And they touch us, they heal us, and they say to us, beloved daughter, beloved son, your faith has made you well. Go in peace, for you are healed.